Right now, someone in America is dying from an overdose. Not in an alley, not in a crack house. In a bedroom, in a suburb, in a town where the lawns are mowed and the schools have good ratings. By the time you finish watching this video, roughly 15 more people will be dead. Fentanyl is killing more than 200 Americans every single day. It is the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45, not car accidents, not cancer, not guns. A synthetic opioid, 50 times more potent than heroin, pressed into pills that look like candy, is wiping out an entire generation in the richest country on earth. And everybody is calling it a public health crisis. Governors are demanding more treatment centers. Senators are pushing for wider distribution of naloxone, the overdose reversal drug. Pharmaceutical companies have been sued for billions. The Sackler family, who built their fortune on OxyContin, became one of the most despised families in America. The language around addiction has shifted. We say disease now. We say recovery. We say these are our sons and daughters. This feels new. It is not. 40 years ago, another drug tore through American communities with the same ferocity. It destroyed families, killed thousands, and created a generation of orphans. But when that drug hit, America did not call it a public health crisis. America called it a crime. And the people who were dying were not called sons and daughters. They were called criminals, crackheads, and super predators. The drug was crack cocaine. And what America chose to do about it, and what America is choosing to do now, tells you something about this country that no politician will ever say out loud. Crack cocaine did not arrive gradually. It exploded. In 1984 and 1985, it swept through the inner cities of New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. like a gasoline fire. The chemistry was simple. Take powder cocaine, mix it with baking soda and water, heat it, and you get small, hard rocks that can be smoked. The high is intense, immediate, and short, which means you want more almost instantly, which means you will do almost anything to get it. Powder cocaine had been a rich person's drug through the 1970s. Studio 54, Wall Street, Hollywood. Glamorous, expensive, associated with success. A gram cost $100 or more. It was the drug of choice for people who had too much money and not enough consequences. But when you cooked it into crack, a single hit cost as little as $5. Suddenly, cocaine was available to anyone. And in communities that were already devastated by factory closings, white flight, and the gutting of social services under the Reagan administration, crack found soil that was ready to burn. To understand how ready, you need to understand what those neighborhoods looked like before crack arrived. By the early 1980s, American inner cities had been hollowed out. The manufacturing jobs that had built the black middle class, the auto plants in Detroit, the steel mills in Gary, the meatpacking houses in Chicago, had been closing for more than a decade. Between 1970 and 1984, New York City lost over 600,000 manufacturing jobs. The people who could afford to leave left. The people who could not were trapped in neighborhoods with failing schools, vanishing services, and unemployment rates that would have been called a national emergency if they had occurred in white suburbs. In some blocks of the South Bronx, more than half the adult men had no steady work. Into that void came a drug that was cheap, powerful, and everywhere. The devastation was staggering. Entire neighborhoods in the South Bronx, in Watts, in inner-city Detroit, transformed seemingly overnight. Murder rates in major cities doubled and tripled. Washington, D.C. earned the nickname Murder Capital. In New York City, there were over 2,000 homicides in 1990 alone. Emergency rooms were overwhelmed. Children were abandoned. Grandmothers who thought they were done raising kids found themselves starting over because their own children had disappeared into the pipe. The human stories were everywhere. A mother in Brooklyn who locked her 3 children in a closet for 2 days while she smoked crack in the next room. A teenage boy in Detroit who watched his father sell the family television, then the furniture, then the refrigerator. A woman in South Central Los Angeles who had been a school teacher 6 months earlier and was now living under a freeway overpass. These were not abstractions. These were people with names and histories and families who loved them. But America did not respond with treatment centers. America responded with handcuffs. In 1986, Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was one of the fastest pieces of major legislation in modern American history. University of Maryland basketball star Len Bias had just died from a cocaine overdose, and the political pressure was enormous. The law created mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses. And buried inside it was a provision that would shape the next 3 decades of American life: the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity. 5 grams of crack cocaine, roughly the weight of 2 sugar packets, triggered a mandatory 5-year federal prison sentence. To receive that same 5-year sentence for powder cocaine, you needed 500 grams, half a kilogram. The same drug, in 2 different forms, with sentences that differed by a factor of 100. The effect was immediate and predictable. Crack was concentrated in black urban neighborhoods. Powder cocaine was concentrated among white users in suburbs and on college campuses. The law did not mention race anywhere in its text. It did not need to. Within 5 years, the federal prison population doubled. Within a decade, it tripled. By the mid-1990s, the United States had the highest incarceration rate in the world, and Black Americans were being imprisoned at 8 times the rate of white Americans for drug offenses, despite studies consistently showing that drug use rates were roughly equal across racial groups. The language reinforced the framework. Politicians competed to sound the toughest. President George H.W. Bush held up a bag of crack on national television during a primetime address from the Oval Office. What most people did not know, what came out years later, was that the DEA had to send agents across the street from the White House to Lafayette Park to buy that bag of crack specifically for the speech. The dealer they arrested was a teenager. He did not even know where the White House was. The agents had to give him directions. That is how far the government was willing to go to stage the image of a war. The media ran wall-to-wall coverage of crack babies, infants born to addicted mothers who were described as permanently damaged, a lost generation. Newsweek called it a biological underclass. Hospital nurses reportedly refused to hold them. Later research would show that this narrative was wildly exaggerated, that the effects of prenatal crack exposure were comparable to those of tobacco and far less damaging than alcohol. But by then, the image had done its work. An entire population had been dehumanized in the public imagination. First Lady Nancy Reagan launched the Just Say No campaign, which reduced the most complex addiction crisis in a generation to a slogan that fit on a bumper sticker. Schools across America taught children that drug users were making a choice, a moral failure, and that the correct response was rejection and punishment. Say no, walk away. And if they do not walk away, lock them up. Then came the super predator theory. In 1995, political scientist John DiIulio warned America that a new generation of remorseless young criminals was coming. Kids raised in crack-ravaged neighborhoods who had no conscience, no empathy, no fear of punishment. The theory was embraced by politicians on both sides. Hillary Clinton used the word super predator in a 1996 speech. State legislatures rushed to try children as adults. The prediction turned out to be spectacularly wrong. Youth crime was already falling when DiIulio made his forecast, and he later publicly renounced the theory. The laws it inspired stayed on the books. and the teenagers who were sentenced under them stayed in prison. No one was building treatment centers in Harlem in 1988. No one was distributing clean pipes in Watts. No governor stood at a podium and said, "These are our sons and daughters." Instead, police departments received federal grants to buy military equipment. SWAT teams raided apartments in the middle of the night. Stop and frisk became standard practice, and the generation of young black men were funneled into a prison system that would mark them for life. Unable to vote, unable to get public housing, unable to get student loans, unable to get jobs. The punishment did not end when the sentence did. It followed them forever. The numbers tell the story as clearly as any human voice could. In 1980, the United States had roughly 500,000 people in prison or jail. By 2000, that number had surpassed 2 million. America, with 5% of the world's population, held 25% of the world's prisoners. And it was not because Americans committed more crimes than people in other countries. It was because America had decided that one particular crime, committed by one particular population, in one particular form, deserved punishment on a scale no democracy had ever attempted. And here is the part that makes this story more than a history lesson. The crack epidemic eventually receded. Murder rates dropped through the 1990s. Communities slowly, painfully rebuilt. But the infrastructure of punishment remained. The prisons stayed full. The mandatory minimums stayed on the books. The 100-to-1 disparity was not reduced until 2010, when Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act, 24 years later. And even then, it was only reduced to 18-to-1. Not eliminated, reduced. Then, starting in the late 1990s, a new epidemic began. And this time, it did not start on a street corner in the South Bronx. It started in a doctor's office in a small town in West Virginia. Purdue Pharma, owned by the Sackler family, launched OxyContin in 1996 with one of the most aggressive pharmaceutical marketing campaigns in history. The company told doctors that OxyContin was safe, that the risk of addiction was less than 1%, and that it was appropriate for moderate pain, not just cancer or post-surgical recovery, but backaches, knee pain, the ordinary discomforts of life. Internal documents would later reveal that the company knew this was false. They marketed the drug anyway. Sales representatives were given bonuses for increasing prescriptions. Doctors who wrote the most prescriptions were taken to conferences, given speaking fees, courted like customers. In its first year on the market, OxyContin generated $45 million in revenue. By 2001, that number was over $1 billion. The pills flooded into small towns, rural communities, and working-class suburbs, places where people worked physical jobs, where injuries were common, where the local doctor was trusted and a prescription was not questioned. A coal miner in West Virginia with a bad back, a construction worker in Ohio with a torn rotator cuff, a nurse in Maine who hurt her knee on a 12-hour shift. They went to a doctor. The doctor wrote a prescription. And within weeks, some of them were addicted to a drug they had been told was safe. By the early 2000s, parts of Appalachia, the Rust Belt, and rural New England were drowning. People who had never touched an illegal drug in their lives were addicted to prescription painkillers. When the prescriptions ran out or became too expensive, they turned to heroin, which was cheaper and easier to find. And when the heroin supply was contaminated with fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and cheap to produce in clandestine labs, people started dying at a rate America had never seen. The transition from pills to heroin to fentanyl happened in stages, but it happened fast. A pill that cost $30 on the street could be replaced by a $5 bag of heroin. And the heroin was increasingly being laced with fentanyl by dealers who wanted to make their supply go further. Most of the fentanyl was manufactured in labs in China and Mexico, using precursor chemicals that could be ordered online. It was shipped through the mail in packages, small enough to fit in a shoebox but potent enough to kill tens of thousands. Users had no way of knowing how much fentanyl was in any given dose. 2 milligrams, the weight of a few grains of salt, could kill a full-grown adult. People were dying in gas station bathrooms, in parked cars with the engine still running, on living room couches with their children in the next room. And unlike crack, which was largely confined to a visible street-level market, fentanyl moved invisibly. It was pressed into counterfeit pills that looked exactly like prescription Xanax, Percocet, or Adderall. Teenagers bought what they thought were normal pills on social media and died in their bedrooms the first time they took one. Parents found their children dead in the morning with no needle marks, no drug paraphernalia, nothing but a single blue pill on the nightstand. The randomness of it, the fact that it could happen to anyone, in any town, on any night, was what finally made America pay attention. More than 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 2023. More than in any single year of the crack epidemic. More than died in the entire Vietnam War. And the response, while insufficient, was fundamentally, structurally different from what had come before. So what is the same and what is different? The parallels are uncomfortable. Both epidemics exploded in communities that had already been abandoned by the economy. Crack hit inner cities that had been gutted by deindustrialization and white flight. Fentanyl hit rural towns and suburbs that had been gutted by factory closings, mine closures, and the disappearance of middle-class jobs. Both times, the drug filled a vacuum that economics and policy had created. Both times, the people who were dying were people who had been told the system would take care of them, and then discovered it would not. Both epidemics involved supply chains that the government either ignored or actively facilitated. During the crack era, journalist Gary Webb documented connections between CIA-backed Contra rebels in Nicaragua and cocaine traffickers who supplied the American market. The story was disputed. Webb was discredited by major newspapers, and he died by suicide in 2004. A later CIA Inspector General report acknowledged that the agency had, in fact, maintained relationships with individuals and organizations involved in drug trafficking. During the opioid era, the FDA approved OxyContin based on limited data. The DEA allowed production quotas to skyrocket, and Congress passed a law in 2016, the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act, that stripped the DEA of its ability to freeze suspicious painkiller shipments. A Washington Post investigation later revealed that the pharmaceutical industry had spent over $100 million lobbying for that single piece of legislation. In both cases, the system that was supposed to prevent the flood helped open the gates, and in both cases, the warning signs were visible years before the crisis peaked. Doctors in inner-city emergency rooms were sounding alarms about crack as early as 1983. Researchers in Appalachia were documenting OxyContin abuse patterns by 1999. Neither set of warnings was acted on with any urgency. Both times, the response came only after the death toll became impossible to ignore. And both times, people who had been asking for help for years watched in disbelief as the country acted shocked by something they had been screaming about all along. And in both cases, the people who profited most were never the ones who suffered most. During the crack era, the kingpins at the top of the supply chain, many of them never caught, made millions, while street-level dealers, most of them teenagers, took the prison sentences. During the opioid era, the Sackler family extracted more than $10 billion from Purdue Pharma before the lawsuits arrived. They moved money into trusts, shell companies, and offshore accounts. When the settlements came, the family paid a fraction of what they had taken. No member of the Sackler family has served a single day in jail. The name is still on buildings at Harvard, at the Met, at the Louvre. Some of those institutions have quietly removed it. Most have not. The family's art collection remains intact. Their trust funds remain untouched. They live in homes that cost more than the annual budgets of the treatment centers that were built to clean up what they created. But here is where the parallels end, and the differences begin. And the differences are where this story gets hard. When crack hit Black urban communities, the response was criminal. Mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, SWAT raids, zero tolerance. The language was war. The enemy was the user. When fentanyl hit white suburban and rural communities, the response was medical, treatment funding, naloxone distribution, medication-assisted recovery. The language was epidemic. The enemy was the disease. The same country, the same addiction. 2 completely different responses. Consider this. In the 1990s, Congress allocated billions for prison construction to house drug offenders, the vast majority of them Black men convicted of crack-related charges. In the 2010s, Congress allocated billions for treatment programs, naloxone distribution, and community recovery centers to serve opioid-addicted populations, the majority of them white. Both programs were funded by the same taxpayers, authorized by the same institution, and signed by presidents who used the same word, crisis. But one crisis was met with concrete and razor wire. The other was met with counselors and medication. Nearly everyone who has studied both epidemics acknowledges this. The question is what to make of it. One side says this: nothing has changed. What you are seeing is the same country making the same calculation it has always made. Who deserves compassion and who deserves punishment? When addiction had a black face, it was a crime. When addiction has a white face, it is a disease. The shift is not progress. It is proof that American empathy has always been conditional, that it depends on what the person dying looks like. A mother in Harlem in 1988 lost her son to crack and watched him get sentenced to 15 years. A mother in Ohio in 2022 lost her son to fentanyl and was offered grief counseling and a memorial walk. Same addiction, same devastation, completely different America. The people who hold this view are not all activists or academics. A retired corrections officer in upstate New York who spent 25 years processing drug offenders, almost all of them Black, almost all of them young, watched the opioid response unfold and said something that stays with you. He said, "I spent my whole career locking up kids for doing what these pills made people do. Now those same judges are ordering treatment. And the only thing that changed is the zip code." A pastor in Baltimore who ran a church basement recovery program through the worst years of the crack epidemic, when there was no government funding, no public sympathy, no news cameras, watched the opioid crisis generate billions in federal treatment dollars and said, "Where was this money when my congregation was dying? We begged for help. We wrote letters to every elected official in the state. Nobody came." Now the same government that locked up our young men is spending millions to save people who look nothing like them. You cannot ask me to believe the timing is a coincidence. The other side says this: yes, the disparity is real, and yes, race played a role. But the correct response to that injustice is not to demand that we punish opioid users the way we punished crack users. The correct response is to acknowledge that we were wrong then. That criminalization was a catastrophic mistake that destroyed communities, filled prisons, and did nothing, absolutely nothing, to reduce addiction rates. Crack use declined because the epidemic burned itself out, not because mandatory minimums worked. The opioid response, for all its flaws and all its lateness, represents what we should have done in the 1980s. Treating addiction as a disease is not special treatment for white communities. It is the lesson we should have learned a generation ago. The tragedy is not that we are showing compassion now. The tragedy is that we did not show it then. A doctor in rural Kentucky who runs a medication-assisted treatment clinic put it this way. She said, "I have patients who drive an hour to get here. They are construction workers and nurses and grandparents. They became addicted because a doctor gave them a prescription." And yes, I know that Black communities did not get this kind of clinic in 1988. That was wrong. But the answer is not to take this clinic away from my patients. The answer is to ask why it was not built 35 years ago. A public defender in West Virginia who represents opioid defendants and who started her career representing crack defendants in D.C. in the early 1990s, sees both eras with a clarity that most people never develop. She said, "I have watched this country respond to the same problem in two completely opposite ways, and I cannot untangle the progress from the injustice. We are doing the right thing now, but we are doing it for the wrong reasons. And until we say that out loud, we have not actually learned anything." Both of these positions are true. And sitting with that discomfort, holding two contradictory truths at the same time without resolving them into something neat, is exactly the thing that America has never been willing to do. We want one narrative: progress or racism, learning or repeating. But this story is both, tangled together in a way that does not come apart cleanly. The racial disparity is documented, measurable, and undeniable, and the medical understanding of addiction has genuinely improved. The question is whether the second would have happened without the first, whether America would have ever embraced a public health approach to addiction if the people dying had not been overwhelmingly white. In 2010, Congress reduced the crack-to-powder sentencing disparity from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, not 1 to 1, 18 to 1. 16 years later, as of the making of this video, it has still not reached parity. There are people sitting in federal prison right now in 2026, serving sentences under the old guidelines for crack offenses that would today be treated as a medical issue if the drug were fentanyl and the defendant were from a different neighborhood. And at the same time, the fentanyl epidemic is far from over. The death toll has started to drop down roughly 25% from its peak, which is real progress. The kind of progress that means tens of thousands of people are alive today who would not have been alive 2 years ago. But 200 people are still dying every day. That is a plane crash every day, with no survivors and no headlines. Rural emergency rooms are still overwhelmed. Families are still burying children. The treatment infrastructure, while better than what crack communities received, is still wildly inadequate. There are counties in America with more pill mills than treatment beds. The Sackler family paid billions in settlements and kept most of their fortune. No pharmaceutical executive has served a single day in prison. The supply of fentanyl continues to pour across borders and through the mail, and no enforcement strategy has significantly slowed it. Both times, America saw the wave coming. Both times, America chose a response that reflected who was drowning more than what was killing them. And both times, the people left behind, the grandmothers raising grandchildren, the communities rebuilding from ashes, the survivors carrying a stigma that no medical diagnosis is fully erased, were the ones who paid the price while the rest of the country moved on to the next crisis. In 1988, a woman in the South Bronx buried her son after a crack-related shooting. There was no memorial walk. There was no candlelight vigil organized by the county. There was a funeral she could barely afford, and a neighborhood that had seen so many funerals it had stopped counting. In 2023, a woman in southern Ohio buried her daughter after a fentanyl overdose. The county organized a remembrance ceremony. The governor mentioned her town by name in a press conference. A local nonprofit delivered a casserole. Same grief. Same empty chair at the dinner table. Same silence in the house at night. Two very different countries decided those two deaths meant very different things. In 1988, a crack-addicted mother in the Bronx could be arrested, charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison in a matter of weeks. Her children would go to foster care. Her name would go on a record that would follow her for the rest of her life. In 2024, a fentanyl-addicted mother in rural New Hampshire can walk into a treatment center, receive medication-assisted therapy, keep custody of her children, and begin recovery with the support of a caseworker, a counselor, and a government-funded program designed specifically to keep families together. Both of these women are real. Both of them were in the grip of something they did not choose and could not control. One of them was treated as a criminal. The other was treated as a patient. And if you swap their zip codes and their skin colors and their decades, every expert in the country will tell you the outcome would have been reversed. The crack epidemic taught America something. The question is whether America learned what it should have or only what it was comfortable learning. Every generation faces the same test. When people are suffering, do you ask what happened to them or do you ask what is wrong with them? In the 1980s, America looked at crack-ravaged communities and saw a moral failure. In the 2020s, America looked at fentanyl-ravaged communities and saw a medical crisis. The addiction was the same. The chemistry of dependence was the same. The desperation was the same. What changed was not the science. What changed was the mirror. And if you are watching this and you lived through one of these eras, or both, you already know something that no study can tell you. You know what it felt like to watch people you loved disappear into something they could not control. And you know whether anyone came to help. The people versus two sides. One story. You decide.